Acts chapter 9 is the conversion of Saul into Paul. So we'll start with that, and then we'll go into some other questions that are a little bit more specific to you. So how did you encounter Christ?
Okay. It starts, I would probably start in my youth as a young man. My grandmother would come pick me up at an early age. I was going with her as far as 2 and 3 years old, going to church, but I can remember times as I was older, still in elementary school, where she would pick me up, take me to Paradise Baptist Church on Sundays. And so as my grandmother moved out of town, the members of that church, Brother Clay, he was a bus driver, he continued to come pick me and my little brother Braylon up for church every single Wednesday and Sunday. So the more that I was going to church and involved with a program, Rolling Ambassadors, which was a program for young men teaching them godly principles, I was also in Sunday school. The more I was involved in church, the more I began to be hungry for Christ at a young age. And so I had a love for God at an early age. I did. That was one of my first passions. I enjoyed church. I enjoyed fellowship. I enjoyed learning the Bible at an early age. And so I would say by the time I was 12, I began to get involved with another church, Greater Mount Carmel Baptist Church, under K. Jerome Free as the pastor. And I was involved with this church through an after-school program in my community, Park Estates, Oklahoma City, on the east side, the heart of the east side, okay? Yeah, that's where we was at. But I was in the after-school program there, and at this time of my life, I was a lot active. I was in the after-school program, but I caused a lot of disruption. And so some of the men from the church, Brother Milton Hopkins, he kind of took a liking to me. He happened to be over the youth choir, and he started investing time with me as a young man. And so some type of way, Milton had a vision going where he was wanting to start an all-city choir. So Milton and I worked, and we started getting involved in some of the schools that was in that area. We started a youth choir that was doing some things around Oklahoma City. And around that same time, I had a dream for myself where I seen myself in my dream. Actually, first I heard myself speaking. I really didn't know it was me. I just heard someone teaching. Then I realized, wait a minute, that's me. And the more that I realized that, then the more I realized I was teaching or preaching the word of God. And so I had discussed that with some people that was involved with my life, Pastor Free being one of those. And so he began to invest into my life, my pastor at that time. First, he started off going to games and spending time with me, being supportive, and kind of teaching me, let me go along with him as he did his daily operations as a pastor and things like that. And when I was 14, I began ministry. I know from the looks of it, the tattoos and scars and all this stuff right here is very contrary to my upbringing in the church. A lot of people don't know that about me. They just think that it was all, all chaos, or that I had a very rugged life. But we're going to get to how I got to that, to this image that you see. But before I got to that, I began ministry at 14 years old on Fire for Christ. Preached at a Southwest Regional Convention. I believe that was in 1999. I was 14 or 15 at that time. My pastor, I lived with him. I began to live with him. And he was the father figure that I had, that I didn't really have growing up. And so with that relationship, I learned a lot of things as far as godly, manly principles. He really taught me important things that even to this day have a lot to do with my godly character as far as who I am. I think that at that point in time in my life, I had a lot of understanding and knowledge of the Bible, but I really didn't have any experience. I could teach and I could preach about what the Word of God said, but I had never been through anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? I could tell you that God would make a way, but I didn't know what it was like to have bills stacked up or be trying to figure out how to rebuild your credit.
Yeah.
I could say that I could preach that God is a deliverer, but me personally, I had never been in a situation where I felt that I needed to be delivered from anything. I was so young at that point. And I believe that I had something to do with my backsliding, because as I would minister and preach, it was times where my pastor would leave the congregation with me for me to preach on a Sunday when in his absence.
Now, how old were you when you was preaching on Sunday?
I was 15, between 14 and 15 years old.
Preaching on Sunday morning.
Preaching on a Sunday morning.
Okay.
And so there was a bit of pride that rose up. You know what I mean? And that's just keeping it on the dollar, telling it as it is. There was a bit of pride that rose up because there were other ministers who were qualified to handle that. And so I think the turning point happened for me in a situation where my mother, and I know that in her mind she had good intentions, but she really brought a lot of things to me because I have not been living with my mother for almost a year now. Mm-hmm. Life was going good for me. And I had got into an altercation with my pastor over, let's say, and I call him Pops because I looked at him as a father figure. I got into it with my Pops because I wanted to go to a basketball game and I hadn't done my responsibilities at home. So he told me no. So as a young teenager, I got upset. Well, I'm going to my mother's house. I leave to go to my mother's house and I'm there for a couple of days. And in some type of way, she comes up with this idea that the relationship that I have with my pastor is inappropriate. Almost in the sense to insinuate that he was some type of, that he was manipulating my mind or some type of pedophile, like he had ill intentions. When this man had been nothing but good to me for the entire time that I had been with him. So in her plot, it's not something that was directly addressed with me. And so she conjures up people to support her beliefs. And I come home from school one day and it's a room full of people and I'm like, what's going on? And then everybody's kind of in tears and kind of looking, you know, and then they just, bam. Well, we don't think that relationship with you and Pastor Free is he doing something to you? And right in that very moment, a part of me that I never knew was there rose up. And I had a lot of anger. Mostly at my mother, but above all, at God. I was angry at God because I didn't understand how I could be doing so good in my own eyesight that he would allow something so embarrassing, something so far from the truth to assassinate my character. You know, and then my mother and my stepfather father at the time would tell me that, we just looking out for your best interests, and you haven't had a chance to live a childhood. You've been traveling and preaching and going to funerals of people you don't even know and visiting people that's sick. You haven't had a chance to live. So, you're going to miss out on your childhood. You need to be doing things that the other kids are doing in school. Like, you need to be normal, and these type of commands that's being placed into my head, is adding fuel and fire to the anger that's inside of me. Because my direct thought is, you think that I'm not normal because I love God, because I was in love with God, because at this point I was angry with God. But I had that confusion as to what they were saying. I needed to be going on dates. I needed to be doing this. Other kids is smoking weed and having fun, But all along, I was exposed to these things, I was exposed to them, but I call myself honoring God, honoring my mother. You see what I'm saying? And so it wasn't long after hearing these commands or opinions of how I should be living, and my anger and frustration towards God, that I just hit a direct 180. And I mean, first thing I did that I recall of was smoking weed. That was the first thing that I got indulged with, is smoking weed.
And how old were you?
I was about 15, yeah, because it was a dramatic shift. I'm talking about the people that was involved in my life at that time. I know that it blew their minds. There's people from Oklahoma City that remember me, as a young man on fire for God. And I have brothers and sisters, ministers that was preaching in the battlefield with me, that tried to reach out to me but I was so upset with God that I wasn't receiving no help from nobody. I just didn't understand that. So it started with weed at 15. And then, I mean, within days, it had turned into alcohol. There was a bootleg that was right around the corner from my house. And so I would muster up the money to go get me a little pint of Christian Brothers. That was the very first drink that I had, indulging in this Christian Brothers. And I'd go get me a pint of Irk and Jerk and Christian Brothers, brandy or whatever. And that didn't do me no good, because I had all this anger built up, full of all this testosterone at that age group. And so I began to act out in rage. And so it wasn't too long that, when I was told I should be doing things that the other kids is doing, it wasn't too long before now my behavior no longer allowed me to be welcome in my mother's home. So now it's real, because I'm 15, maybe 16 years old, and now I'm going to stay with family member and different family member, because everywhere I go, I got this cloud of anger and this cloud of rage and this drinking going on and smoking going on, to where I'm unwelcome everywhere, And so that's when I found myself being affiliated with a group of guys that grew up in my neighborhood, the Damus, Bloods. It wasn't too many Bloods that was really banging and really getting it in on the east side. In Oklahoma City, most of the Bloods had their own communities, that was not necessarily on the heart of the east side. So we was kicking up dust in foreign territory that wasn't really ours. And I think that what ignited me was the fact that people always identified me as the church boy. And that would be the quickest and the fastest way to provoke me to act in violence, is to refer to me as the church boy. Because I no longer wanted to be identified with anything that had to do with church or anything that had to do with God. It was almost if I was being made fun of or mocked if a person said that to me. We had to get it on. It didn't matter where we was at. We had to get it on until people learned to respect that wasn't the identity that I wanted for myself. And so this behavior continued on, and this anger towards God, it lasted for a very, very long time, which led me to my next turn of events in life from just using alcohol and marijuana. Those were in gang affiliation. That chapter of my life led me into the next chapter of my life, which would have been when I was 18, between 18 and 19 years old, where I met a young lady who happened to be, had a background in prostitution. When we got together, she was no longer doing it. She was trying to rehabilitate herself from a life of prostitution. And she had a young son, and when we first got together, my motive was I just want to be her boyfriend. We're going to do this family thing. I had good intentions, but the more that I got to know her and the more that she talked about her lifestyle as a prostitute, the more enticing that got to me, because I'm listening to all this money that she's making, okay? And I like to smoke weed, and I like to drink, and I like to go to the club. I like to kick it. So, if she getting this type of money, man, that's a lot of weed we could be smoking, a whole lot of drink we could be drinking, a whole lot of clubbing that we can be doing, And that's exactly what went on. I was working the job at the time, and me and her experimented with ecstasy for the first time. So now I done added another drug into the combination of what I already had going on. And see, what ecstasy did for me was it took away all rational thinking. Everything began to be a good idea, And so we spent the majority of our time taking the checks that I was making from work, spending it on marijuana, ecstasy, and alcohol, and going to the clubs religiously. Like, that's what we did, to where we found ourselves getting evicted. Well, she was the one with the apartment. I done brought her down. I done got her evicted out of her place because I'm living in her place, bringing her down. And once we hit rock bottom, I had told her, man, I don't ever want you thinking about that life of prostitution ever again, because, but when we hit rock bottom and I still had that monkey scratching, and then I'm like, well, you said you loved the other dude that you was with, and you was out there prostituting for him, and you was doing this and making that. You say you love me, and we out here with no place to go, and and she didn't get with the program, but we kind of like bumped heads, and she started dancing a little bit. She wasn't out there how she was, but she started dancing or whatever. But I started, because I had that knowledge of her lifestyle, I was able to take the knowledge that she had given me and direct that towards other women to support, what I had going on with that lifestyle and drugs and everything like that. And so by the time my son was born, which me and her had a son, by the time he was born, I'm knee deep in the game. I'm all in. I'm all in. It's pimp or die. I'm sworn to the lifestyle of pimping as if it is my religion. I'm at this point, I still have anger built up towards God. So there's no reverence, but my loyalty and my commitment is to the lifestyle of this game. So therefore, I'm not having any relations with any women who are not involved with that lifestyle. And if they do show any interest in me, then they conform into the lifestyle that I'm in, and they being a part of this movement. And if it's not that, then it's not anything else, you know. And so that began to grow, I started traveling with it. I started building a reputation for being sincere, for being, you know, really about the game. And it lasted up until, I'll say, I was 25. And I'm a bag up for 1 second, and just because I want to highlight, this is very important to understand how much anger I still had at God, even through this lifestyle that I was in. Because I remember one event in particular, and I'm not going to use the gentleman's name. He's a well-known pimp all across America, from Oklahoma, older gentleman, got major experience in the game. But me and him had a disagreement, a misunderstanding, because one of the females that he had inquired showed interest in my camp and what I had going on. So she had left him to come be a part with me. They refer to that as choosing up. And so as he brought me her possessions, he also brought me a Bible. And we in front of a lot of people. Everybody is here to witness this. A lot of pimps is there present. And Lord have mercy. He gets out and he says to me, he says, man, you know, really this pimping ain't for you. And I'm telling you this right now. He said, I done my homework with you. And you need to go back to preaching, because this pimping is not for you. And he tried to give me the Bible in front of everybody. And all I can hear is people going, hoo, 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 hoo. And that triggered that same, and that Bible right then and there, I pushed that Bible out of his hand till the Bible hit the concrete. And I looked at him and told him I'm a pimp. And I just wanted to bring that up, because when we get to the crossroad of how I came to Christ, it's very important, you know, that you have an understanding of how angry I was with God throughout my life. And yet God has still kept death and kept all type of scenarios that could have took me out. He never, ever took his hand off of me, because through my years of gang banging, I got friends that died in the midst of that, shot. I got friends that went to prison to never come home, and God kept his hands on me in spite of me having a lot of anger towards him. And so at the age of 25, which is a very, very, very tough time for me, I had began to settle in Oklahoma City, where I'm from. And I had a good friend that I had always grew up with, man. I loved him like a brother. We played Little League football together and everything. This was my guy. Whenever you seen me, you seen him. And he had lived off in California for some time, maybe since we was about 20. He moved to California and had been out there. But he was staying at my house, and we had been drinking, a lot drinking. We was on Xanaxes. We was on a lot of things. In some type of way, me and him is messing around with guns. And all I really know in that situation is that he got shot in the chest and is no longer here. And this is somebody that was like a brother to me. And I called the ambulance, but I also panicked and left the house. And the next day I found out that he had died. And so at that point, I turned myself in. And I was facing murder in the first degree for the death of a brother. Someone who I had Thanksgiving dinners with his family, because I was no longer allowed to come to my mother's house because of the violence that I had caused over there in my young years. And so this was a very, very, very painful experience for me, because no matter what went on with my life, I knew that his life was ultimately over, and that I caused his family that pain and that grief. And so I fought the case, not really fighting it, but I went through the judicial process, and I ended up signing for some time, and I went on to prison. When I got to prison, my mind still wasn't in the county. In the county jail, I started to open the Bible. I started to pray more, because now I'm in a situation, where, I knew that only God could get me out. You know what I mean? But by the time I made it to prison, it was more so, and this is really the truth of prison, because prison should be a place where people are reformed, but prison in all truth is more so like a kick it spot 24/7 without no females. Drugs, everything that's out on the streets is right there in prison, So didn't much change with my lifestyle when I first got to prison. Only thing different was it wasn't gonna be no pimping in prison, because ain't no women in there for all of that. So, I automatically reconnected with Damus that I grew up with, and they had heard how I was living on the streets and doing this pimping thing, and I believe as my sentence began to go and the years began to go and people started to fade away, like people that I was in contact with, the prostitutes that I had when I went to prison, because when I went to prison originally, I had a couple Mercedes, nice jewelry, mink coats, life was really good. I had 3 women that lived with me during the time that I had caught my case. And so I still had them while I was in the county and when I first got to prison. But as people started to fade away and I got to myself, then that's when I started to really observe and think about my commitment to that lifestyle, because it was always pimp till I die with me. That's what it was. And it's crazy because as I began to think and look back over my life, I realized that what I had as a gift, the ability to influence, in the early chapters of my life, it was used to build choirs, to bring people to Christ, and these things like that. But in that season of my life as a pimp, my influence was used to destruct, to bring people into bondage. You know what I'm saying? I led people into captivity. And as I was in prison, I started to think back on how many women, because once I left the scene, it's like they lifestyles just got worse. Mm-hmm. They went from just being prostitutes to being prostitutes now that was addicted to hardcore drugs, that was out there not doing it for the money, but doing it to support habits, And so, and I also had a daughter in the process before I went to prison. And as I was in prison, I remembered and I thought, like, man, this lifestyle that I'm living, what good is this gonna do for my daughter? And while I was in prison, I even remembered about a time that my daughter had come out of the room, and as the 3 women were preparing to leave to go to work to prostitute themselves, I heard my daughter screaming out the top of her lungs, and I turn around, and she got one high heel on, and she got a purse over her shoulder, and she trying to leave and exit out the door that the prostitutes was leaving out of. And that door came back and slammed her fingers, you know? And so as I was sitting there in prison thinking back on this, you know, because in my mind it's still made up, I'm gonna do this time and I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna be a better pimp than what I was, because I'm gonna do this different and I'm gonna do that different. But when I started to realize the impact that this was having on other people's lives, you know, even my daughter, and what was in her future if I was to continue this life. See, this right here to me is my coming to Christ introduction, because this is where Christ found me. It wasn't me seeking to change. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't my agenda to change. But it was when I got all the way disconnected. I couldn't call a prostitute and say, hey, I need $200 put on my books and go get me a money pack so I can go get me a sack of weed. You know, it was when I was all the way isolated from any resource to be able to call out, you know what I mean, that I began to have thoughts that conflicted what my agenda was. And so this is when Christ began to work on me, and by showing and revealing the damage that I done and what could be out there for my daughter. And so then I began to pick up the word of God, in which I hadn't done in, I'll say, about 14 years. I had really got into the word of God, seeking God out. And as I did, and I began to read the word of God, it became a lot more real to me, because I could see myself in the scripture. When in Proverbs it talked about a man's sins being right in his own eyesight. And I could relate to that, because I believed as I pimped that I was called to be a pimp, because prostitutes needed a good man, that they got kids too, and these kids deserve to have a father. I believed that it was somebody for everybody. So I justified my manipulative, negative, demonic influence and tried to make it right in my own eyesight. And I seen that. And the more that I got in the word, it took me back to the cross where Christ was dying on the cross. And he offered the man who was guilty of his sins, worthy of the punishment, told him, today you will be with me in paradise. And at that point I realized that Jesus and what he did on the cross, you know, it wasn't just if I would have kept up with the lifestyle that I was living as a young boy would qualify me to be worthy to go to heaven. It was the fact that he died even for all the mess that I got myself into after I was angry with God, you know. And so when I accepted that understanding, I continued to read on where Jesus had talked also and taught his disciples that he come for the sick and not those who are healthy. He told them that he will pray to the Father, for the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And that's when I realized that, you know, it's a lot of people, even when I was in ministry, you know, I was dealing with a lot of Christians and a lot of believers, but what about the people who was caught up in the stuff that I had got myself into? You know, the drugs, the alcohol, the violence, the gangs, the pimps, the prostitutes. You know, what about these people? What about the people that's in prison? You know, if I had not had my upbringing to lead me to the Bible, you know, what is the hope? If I didn't have that, you know, what would I have to stand on? So where is the hope for those who don't have that, who have themselves caught up in that lifestyle? you know? And so when I began to understand and look at the Bible from that perspective with a sense of compassion, you know, then I used to say, my next thoughts, my train of thoughts when I understood that was, what would make you think that you could ever be anything other than a pimp? You don't got no high school diploma. You already had an opportunity to serve God, and you chose this lifestyle, you know? So then I went through a season of being down on myself. You see what I'm saying? And discrediting what God was revealing to me, you know? And I don't know, man. I continued because it got bad for me, because during that season of being down on myself, because we also got STG in the prison. And what that means is security threat groups. So basically, because of my gang affiliation, I could no longer have no type of movement. So I was confined to a prison, to not a prison cell, but a unit in general. I couldn't leave off that unit. If we went to eat, it was just this unit. If we went to the gym, it was just this unit. So there was no opportunity for school to get my GED. There was no opportunity for VOTEC. There was no opportunity for any religious activities. Once you STG, you can't go to church services or nothing, you know. And some type of way, I ended up getting in the habit of watching TD Jakes every day. And so after listening to the messages of TD Jakes and starting a devotion of reading the Proverbs and getting back in the habit of reading the Bible after I had been down on myself, saying that I was unqualified for anything, to even be a Christian or a believer, that it was too late for me, I started to see where in the Bible there were people with backgrounds that were similar or worse than mine. You know, even with Abraham and the manipulative move that he tried to do in using his wife, to say that she was his sister to gain riches. And even with Noah being a drunk, and Moses being a murderer, and even Saul being a murderer. So the more I read, the more that I seen that what I've been through doesn't define. And so God continued to work on me in that process. And it's like the more that I believed that God was capable and that it wasn't on me, that was the thing that I had to understand. I had to understand that whatever happens in my life, anything that's going to change in my life, it can't be from me, you know. Because if it's from me, I'm going to always resort back to what's comfortable for me, you know. And so I believe that it was God. And it's just the more and more that I believed that it was God, the more positive energy I would have, the more joy I would have, the more I would be disgusted with the conversation that used to be appealing to me. The less likely I wanted to go and participate in violence and things in that nature. Not one time did I lose the disrespect from my peers, from my homies. Never, not one time did I ever lose respect from my homies in the penitentiary for loving God. And that meant something to me. That let me know that my influence was real and it was respected. You know, you in prison, it's a bunch of hoorah ragging on this person, or plotting to go take this man's stuff or go do this, which I'm guilty of doing these things in the past in my incarceration. I had been one to be involved in those things, but as God was working on me, then those things it was no longer interesting to me. I stopped smoking weed in prison. I stopped smoking cigarettes. Didn't do any X pills. Stopped smoking water. All these things I had done in the world and in prison. Cocaine, ecstasy, PCP. Stopped all of those things. And as I got closer to getting out, now I did 9 years flat. As I got closer to getting out, I was already letting people know, when I get out, I'm done. No more pimping. I'm going to live a good life. I'm going to try to find a church that I can get to where I can be involved and try to grow. I'm gonna do it the right way this time.
Now, so you served 9 years. How many were you sentenced to?
I was sentenced to 10 in
10, okay.
and 10 on paper.
Okay.
That charge was amended from murder 1 to manslaughter. So I served 9 flat on that. I got out of prison and started the personal training thing. And I didn't really have the financial stability to continue on that course. I needed to be able to make an honest living, you know, and that wasn't coming fast enough to where I knew that if I continued on with that, then I could find myself trying to look for a way to make some fast money. And so I ended up leaving from Oklahoma City, coming down here. I met a amazing woman that has been very supportive of my transition and in which way living the life that I want to live is pleasing to God. And so I got down here, I got connected with Going Hard for Christ Church, up under Lawrence people, began discipleship training, and I got myself enrolled in Tulsa Welding School. And life has been pretty much everything that God has shown me while I was incarcerated, like as far as what it will be if I surrendered myself to his will, to live his life, to live a life for Christ. You know, finished welding school, the job that I got came to me. It's like everything that I have in my life right now that's good, it's like it's came to me. Like I've put in applications or I've done the work or whatever, but I've drawn nothing but positivity. Nothing but blessings have fallen on me. And so that has done nothing but just strengthen my belief system to know that God is able. Still been free. I stopped smoking weed probably 4 years before I got out of prison. My transition, the time that God was working on me, was about 4 years of my incarceration. The last 4 years of my life, God was working on me. Still drug free, amen. Still staying away from negative conversations and things that's not going to be in the direction that God will have me on. Still watching my eyes and ears and keeping myself away from those things. I'm away from Oklahoma City, away from all of the stuff that would have, and I'm being built up. And so that right there would be the sum up of how I encountered Christ.
Amen. All right, so to go back in the story here a little bit. So, you was involved with the ladies who were involved in your movement, as you referred to it.
Right.
Do you know what happened to any of them? You keep tabs on them?
Yes, sir. The one who introduced me to the lifestyle has went on to become married and raising a family far away from the game, run her own business. And I'm very proud of her, very much proud of her. The rest of them, but there are numerous. There's so many women. I couldn't. I'm talking about the ones that I would say really bought in to where I was going. The ones who served and stayed down for a while. One of them is strung out on meth. The last time I seen her, she would have come up to the prison and seen me, and she was probably about 80 pounds smaller than what she had been.
Oh, wow.
And she wasn't nowhere near to being in the right state of mind. Another one is a fugitive and still on drugs and out there bad. And I know another one that has went on to get her nail tech certification, and so I'm proud of her. But it's even that influence has even it's affected a lot of women. That's just pretty much the main ones. Most of them are still on drugs and still in the lifestyle. Only a few have gotten out of the lifestyle. But there are even young men who have idolized what I done and looked at it from the outside looking in. And it has affected their life. But little do people realize is that a lot of the drug and a lot of the drug abuse and alcohol that I had was because even though I had at least, I was never the type of person to just have one bride. I was never the type of pimp that's like pimping on my girlfriend. Like that wasn't what it was. I really had a team. So with multiple women bringing in at the least $1,000 a day in order to even enter into my presence, at least $1,000, or they gonna stay out there until they get it. Even with that much money coming in and having all the things that a normal person or a lot of fleshly, worldly guys would want, I still felt empty on the inside. There was still a major void in my life. I would go out to the clubs and it would probably be 10, 15 people with me, and we would have a good time. Nobody could spend their money. It's all on me. But with all of that and all that I'm doing, I'm still miserable on the inside. And I know that in the beginning, I had a desire. I wanted to be the biggest pimp that I could be. And when I first started, people would laugh and mock and say, man, you not no pimp. You walk around with creases in your shoes, man, from walking too much, man. You not no pimp. But I believed and I believed and I believed, and I got to such a level that I looked back on it and said, man, it's really not all that it was set out to be, And so, yeah, the females that was in that, man, it's a big problem, man, because when they get in that lifestyle to make that fast money, it's quick and it's fast and it's easy. And back when I was involved with it, it was more a pimp and prostitute relationship was more pimp and prostitute relationships than it is now. Because what has happened with this social media and all these media influences with these women that's being provocative and talking to these young girls through music, about their body and how they can get a bag and get this and get that. And so you got young girls that's growing up that's not even thinking on the terms of I want to go to college or I want to do something for myself. And so they instantly, automatically thinking about, well, going to be a stripper. And then the strip club is nothing but a gateway to prostitution, And so now prostitution is more acceptable and more social. There's more of an option for young people, And so now it's not really so much involvement with pimps being in control of that, And so women are finding themselves in more vulnerable situations. Some would say that it's worse to have a pimp, and some understands the protection and all that comes with it or whatever. And it's good. And I can't say it's good pimps, but it's people that don't put drugs on women in order to get them to do that. But most of the time when a woman gets involved with that lifestyle, it's very hard. It's very hard to get out of that lifestyle. Because like I said, the money comes so easy and it comes so fast that they think, what is the point of going to go get a 9-to-5 or trying to put in applications? And so, yeah, man, they still out there, brother. And that part, I'm telling you, man, and I share this with people that I talk to about my own spiritual concerns and everything, is that I feel sometimes, and I've asked God to forgive me, and when the time comes where I see women face to face that I can actually ask them to forgive me, I look for those opportunities. And nothing grieves my spirit more And I think that's what keeps me humble and passionate about Christ, is that nothing grieves my spirit knowing that I was able to be liberated and set free from the bondage that dominated my life, and to know that they still are affected by that lifestyle. Because when you talk about a woman that's involved with prostitution, and when I had something to do with introducing her to that lifestyle, not only am I affecting a woman, but I'm affecting somebody's mother. You see what I'm saying? And so when a mother is being affected, when this child is growing up without the mother, what type of influence is this going to have on that child's life? You know what I'm saying? So that sin has a multiplying effect. You know what I mean? And so that's one of the things that keeps me so, I can't turn back. I can't go back to that because God already spared me. Somebody's life was lost during the process of me being liberated by God. Somebody lost their life. And then there's people that still caught in bondage behind things that I showed them to. You know? So yeah.
So it still affects you?
Yeah, it does. It does have an effect on me, man. It grieves my spirit. It moves me. Yeah. Anytime that I'm in a place of worship and intimacy with God, a lot of times it don't have nothing to do with me, because I know that God is working things out. My worship and my intimacy and my emotional expression is towards the lives that I've led into bondage. That's where my prayers and my heart is set, that God will set them free. I'm a diehard 49ers fan. Anybody know that? And I love to see the day when we win a Super Bowl, another Super Bowl. That would be a joyful day for me. And I would love to see that happen in person. But the joy and the glory that I would have in seeing one person from that lifestyle that I introduced to that lifestyle, life being transformed, that their life be saved and transformed by the power of God as it worked in me, will bring me joy, more joy than seeing the 49ers win a Super Bowl in person. So, yes, my heart is always set on the people that I led into that lifestyle. Always.
Did you look like the pimps that was like on TV, or what was it like?
Well, that was, yes, I wore a lot of clothes and jewelry to let it be known what it was, because I didn't want no question. I didn't want nobody to think of me as no square. So when I show up to a club or to an event, I wanted people to say, "Oh, there go them pimps right there. There go, yeah, there go that, yeah." So, I sported finger waves and long perms and all of that stuff. Yeah.
My second one is, if they were watching this right now, what would you like to say to them?
My God. First, I would like to express that I am deeply and truly sorry for the lifestyle that I introduced them to, for any pain and suffering that I know that I caused, for any violence and any sexual act that was done to them against their will, for taking them away from their children. I am deeply apologetic and remorseful for that. And I would also want to say that in spite of how difficult it is and how the statistics say that it's not easy to walk away from that lifestyle, there is hope through Jesus Christ, who is a deliverer, who will set you free. And I would encourage them to find a church that is centered around discipleship, to where they can have someone to disciple them and to lead them in the ways to transform their life so that they can put their past behind them and search for a brighter future.
See something to the young brothers. You guys, they seen you out there, you rolling in whatever you're rolling in, you got your jewelry on, and they saying kind of what you said about the young ladies, I don't need to go to school. I mean, I can be a pimp like Brent.
Yeah.
So from them young guys out there who thinking that, who thinking about joining the set, what would you say to them?
It ain't what it is. It ain't what it is. Everything that look good is not good. And one of the things that I want to encourage, and I'm grateful that I got this illustration from my pastor Lawrence People on Wednesday, Going Hard for Christ Church, baby, is this right here. He used an example. He said he grabbed a guitar and he said, this guitar, his brother can take this guitar and he can play this guitar to bring glory to God. Or he can take this guitar and he can go run off to a bar and use it for the wrong reasons, to seduce, to all these things that can bring condemnation on someone or bring a person into the wrong area. And I say that because I want to validate the young men. I want to speak to them because behind every pimp is a person that has a mindset to lead. Behind every pimp is a gift to lead, to influence. Behind every real respected OG in the gang is an ability to lead. Now that gift and that talent, when it's used for gangs and it's used for pimping and all of these things, then it produces death. And it is nothing but the grace of God that was on my life that kept me from not experiencing death and not getting stuck in the penitentiary where I'll never, ever be able to get out. And so behind every drug dealer, there's some type of business mind that it can be shaped and molded to where it can be a successful business for a person to be able to take care of their family and be able to have the funds to advance God's kingdom. Behind every little homie that's just good at following order, there's a place and a need for soldiers, for good employees. Yeah, and it's all about learning how to manage the funds that you make and what to do with them. It's ways to live a life. And I think one of the biggest things that affects the younger generation of what's going on is what they listening to in the music and what they see, and a lot of times it is not that. And I would just highly encourage the brothers, the young men, find your gift. Get with somebody that has an area where you feel that you are gifted and talented, and seek to grow and develop in your gift. Get involved in a church to where you can be discipled and taught about finances, taught about consequences to your actions and choices, because behind every choice and every action there is a consequence. But that lifestyle, pimping and whoring, gang banging, the end of that is death. And I beg and I beg and I beg for you to choose life.
Hi everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please feel free to subscribe at the button below and share it with your friends and family.
And also, if you'd like to support us, you can go to our Patreon page. You also go to axlinefilms.com under the donate tab, where you can do PayPal and Cash App. We also have great gear for you to buy, like our Axline Films hoodies. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
Bye.